Welcome to Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. Today's conversation promises to be an insightful one with a remarkable guest. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, I'm so glad you're here. Our goal is to bring you closer to the innovative leaders and thinkers shaping our future. And today, I am thrilled to welcome General Larry Spencer. General Spencer serves as president for the Armed Forces Benefit Association and Five Star Life Insurance Company. AFBA provides survivor benefits and other benefits for those who serve this great nation, including members of the uniformed services, first responders, government employees, and their families. Five Star Life is the primary underwriter of AFB member policies and is a growing provider of group and worksite insurance products. Retiring as a four-star general, Spencer spent over 40 years in the Air Force. His last military assignment was the Vice Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force, Washington, D.C. In this capacity, he was the second highest ranking military member in the Air Force. He presided over the Air Staff and assisted the Chief of Staff of the Air Force with organizing, training, and equipping 690,000 active duty, Guard, Reserve, and civilian forces serving in the United States and overseas. Spencer began his career in the enlisted ranks and rose to become a four-star general. He was commissioned through Officer Training School in 1980 as a distinguished graduate. He has commanded a squadron, group, and wing, and was vice commander of the Oklahoma City Air Logistics Center. He was also the first Air Force officer to serve as the Assistant Chief of Staff in the White House Military Office. He served as Chief Financial Officer and then Director of Mission Support at a major command and held positions within Air Staff and Secretariat. Prior to his assignment as Vice Chief of Staff, the General was Director of Force Structure, Resources, and Assessment, Joint Staff, the Pentagon, Washington, D.C., reporting directly to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Spencer participated in contingency operations Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Desert Thunder, Desert Fox, Allied Force, and Iraqi Freedom. He has two awards: the Air Force General Larry Spencer Innovation Award and the Air Force General Larry Spencer Special Acts and Services Award. He's also the author of two books: Dark Horse, General Larry O. Spencer and His Journey from the Horseshoe to the Pentagon, and The Green Eye Shades of War, a historical review of financial management during the war. Well, welcome to Tipping Spears, General Spencer.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, well, can you start us off today while telling us where your story begins?
Yeah, that's interesting. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. in the Southeast. An interesting upbringing. My father was actually in the Army, a soldier. My mother had not even graduated high school. There were six of us. I was the oldest. To be honest, I struggled a little bit, in the neighborhood there, trying to figure out who I was. My self-esteem wasn't very high. I didn't have my self-worth was lower than it should be. And so it was just a struggle. I was not a good student in school. What I was good at is sports. And that's, in hindsight, I wish I was better academically, but I was really good at sports. And so that was my focus, football in particular. And so I did very well in high school, captain of the team, all county this and all state that. And then something interesting happened. I became a senior and, the football season was over and I started having college coaches call and send me letters about scholarships to college. And I was confused. My parents hadn't been to college, so they weren't able to help me. I really didn't have any mentors at the time. So it was just a very tough time. And I graduated when I was 17. I found myself in the summer, sitting in my parents' basement, just not sure what I was going to do. So I went and got a job for the summer at the Census Bureau in Suitland, Maryland, as a GS1. And again, had no idea what I was going to do. for whatever reason, the Census Bureau is right down the street from a mall. It's actually called Iverson Mall off of Branch Avenue, those familiar with the DC, Maryland area. And now I'm going to have to ask you to use your imagination now for a second because this is going to be hard for you to believe because you can actually see me. But back in those days, I had an afro like you would not believe.
Oh.
And so this was in the 70s. And so I went down to the mall and I purchased, this is a sign of the times, I purchased a purple jumpsuit with a matching pair of purple high platform shoes. And the jumpsuit was bell bottom, by the way, and a big wide black brim hat. Uh, I've got pictures of that at home, which I don't show anybody. But you're gonna have to use your imagination. And so I was literally walking through the mall. I had my clothes in the bag, and I walked by an Air Force recruiter's office. My father had was in the Army, had spent 20 years in the Army. But I'll talk a little bit later about his service. But I had no intention of joining the military. It was the tail end of Vietnam. Military
Mhm.
was not very popular.
Mhm.
Uh, but I did like airplanes, and so I was standing outside his office looking at the airplanes, and he came out and asked me to come in. And I'm not going to say the recruiter lied to me, but he, we got to talking about football, and he said, you know what? Think about this. You can enlist in the Air Force today. One day, good deal. If you have to do it today, and you can go to basic training. You can get into basic training. You can then take the test for the Air Force Academy. You can then be accepted in the Air Force Academy, and you can play football for the Air Force Academy. And he said, "Well, how does that sound?" I said, "Well, I don't have a better plan." So I said, "That sounds pretty good." Now, obviously, I guess in theory that was possible. It was certainly not practical
Mhm.
because when I got to basic training, and I brought that up that my TI did not want to hear about the Air Force Academy. I think his words were, shut up and get back in line. Uh, I tell people I literally sort of stumbled into the Air Force recruiter's office, and when I stumbled out of there, I was in the Air Force. Um, and so the good news is by the way, my parents knew nothing about this. I didn't tell them. And in fact, I don't know why exactly, but I didn't really tell them. I was supposed to leave. Well, I went up and got my physical up in Baltimore. They didn't know anything about that. And I think I think it was like 2 days before I was supposed to leave. I was at the dinner table and I said, "Hey, by the way, I joined the Air Force," and I asked my father, could he drop me off at the bus station, in a couple of days. They were in shock, uh, but they were happy because at least I was doing something. And my mother, she used to call me a hippie, so she was just happy that I was doing something, other than sitting around the house, combing out my afro. Um, so, but I was playing semi-pro football at the time. There was a semi-pro league here in DC. So anyway, that was my entry into the Air Force, and as it turns out, I actually loved it. I love the discipline of it. I enjoyed the camaraderie. The TIs, training instructors, yelling and screaming. They were like football coaches to me. It didn't bother
Mhm.
me, and I enjoyed basic training. I enjoyed the technical training after, and
Mhm.
so that was my that was my intro into the United States Air Force.
That sounds like a great takeoff for a military career. You were styling going into that recruiting office.
Absolutely. In fact, it was interesting. And by the way, that long hair was the style back then.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was in basic training, about 2 days in, they get you in the barbershop, and
Hmm.
just to watch all that hair fall on the floor which was just amazing. But I was, everybody else was just like me. Everybody
Yeah.
had long hair.
Yeah. Transformed.
I wish I could grow long hair now, but those days are gone.
Well, was there a particular event or person that served as a catalyst for your career?
Yes, absolutely. So after basic training, let's fast forward a little bit. I'm in my first assignment and I get married. And if, it's kind of tough to think back on in hindsight, although we've still been married over 50 years, but, we were married and with two kids at 19 years old, both of us. And so I got an assignment to Taiwan, which was very tough because I've got a wife and who with one son and another one on the way, and they send me away for a year. And that was really, really tough. Um, but I worked in the post office in Taiwan and was on the base basketball team. And one of the things that we did, again, I don't know if I should be talking about this or not, but the I made a pact with my friends over there that we would go the entire year without getting a haircut.
Mm.
And my hair was already too long when I got there. Now, there was a technique that we used, or that I used. You just put a stocking cap on at night. It pressed it all down. I worked in the post office. I worked in the back. We were just putting up mail. So we had a pretty cool boss, and he said, "Look, keep your hat on, and if nobody bothers you or comes to me complaining, I don't care."
Mhm.
So I came back from Taiwan to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri.
Mhm.
Now, and I got all this hair. And so I was spending an inordinate amount of time disguising the length of my hair. And in fact, on the weekends, and I know it's hard to believe looking at me now, but on the weekends, my wife would braid my hair. And I mean, I had braids all the way down. I mean, it was crazy. I remember this like it was yesterday because my wife and I went to see the movie Jaws. Jaws had just come out.
Mhm.
It was on a Sunday, and I didn't have time to pack my hair down. And so I'm in uniform. I'm afraid to death. I couldn't even put my hat on. So I came into the office, and my office desk was facing the door. And I was just sitting there sweating, just knowing I was going to get in trouble. And so I was in early. I was the first one there. Well, someone came walking by the door. It happened to be a chief master sergeant, which in the Air Force is the top enlisted rank. He looked in and kept going. And so I kind of wiped my brow and said, wow, I got away with that one. And then before Michael Jackson made this popular, that chief master sergeant moonwalked back to that door. And he looked in at me and he said, "Oh my God, Airman, I can't believe what I'm seeing." He said, "Get up from the desk." And I said, "Chief, I can't get up. I mean, my boss is," he said, "Get up from the desk and follow me." And so I got up from the desk, went and followed him out the door. Again, I couldn't even put my hat on. He put me in his pickup truck, took me to the base barbershop, and he stood there. He said, "Give him a military haircut." And I stood there and watched my hair fall on the floor of the barber shop. And so after that was over, we were riding back, and he started talking to me. What was interesting was he was blunt and direct, but I didn't feel like he was chewing me out. I felt like he really cared.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying, "Look, I was young once, and if you want to get out of the Air Force and grow your hair down to the ground, that's up to you. But
Mhm.
while you're in the Air Force, you need to follow the rules." And he said, "Do you understand?" I said, "I got it, Chief. I understand." So he said, "By the way, you look like you do a pretty good job. What are you doing? Are you taking college courses? What are you doing to?" And I said, "No, I'm not. Why not?" That led to, before I went back to work, a trip over to the base education office. And I signed up for two college courses on the spot. And that led to my college degree, um, excuse me, which he stood by me the whole time and attended my graduation. Uh,
Wow.
so when I talk to people about mentorship, that single chief master sergeant literally changed the directory of my life. I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for him, but he changed the trajectory of my life. I got my college degree, and he helped me get into officers training school. and I went in officer training school and became an officer, lieutenant. Now I'd long cut my hair since before then, uh, but it's amazing how one person could make that much of a difference because I felt like he cared about me, not he wasn't just chewing me out. He was literally interested in my well-being.
Yeah. Oh, he saw potential in you that you didn't even see for yourself.
That's correct. And I talk to a lot of people about that. You know, a lot of times I think today in the military, we allow lawyers to run things and commanders just listen to lawyers. And I tell commanders all the time, you know, your job, you know, a lawyer's job is to provide advice. It's your job to make decisions in command.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of young folks out there who are just young and immature, and you need to discern between are they just immature and need a maybe a little bit of a kick in the behind, or are they really bad people that you need to get out? And and I tell folks all the time, leaders, you know, there's a lot of Airman Spencers out there who just need somebody to help them.
Mhm.
And so I was blessed to have run across him and not someone else. And again, he became a mentor and a friend ever since that day.
It's so heartwarming and encouraging. So I know every journey, has its hurdles. Can you tell us what some of the biggest obstacles were that you faced in your career and how you overcame them?
Yeah, it was interesting. Once I got commissioned, and again, I loved it. You know, my career field was financial management initially, then
Mhm.
I got into logistics, but um, and I don't, you know, other services have it a little bit differently, but the same. In the Air Force, it was all about being a pilot, and I get it. You know, it is the Air Force, so I'm not complaining about that.
Yeah.
But I was told my entire career that because I was not a pilot, that there was a ceiling that I had, and I couldn't go but so far.
Mm-hmm.
And that it didn't bother me because I understood it, but man, it challenged me, and it strength, you know, it gave me motivation,
Hmm.
like you wouldn't believe, and you know, because so my attitude was, you know, the only one that can stop me is me, and I'm just not going to listen to that. I'm going to learn as much as I can about aviation, about air warfare, about everything about the Air Force I can. Excuse me. And so it worked out. But yeah, that, you know, I think throughout life, people need to understand that they're going to get knocked down, and it's inevitable. But you have to learn how to pick yourself up and keep going.
Hmm.
Uh, I tell folks all the time that um, you can't score a touchdown if you're not in the game,
Hmm.
and there's always going to be people sitting on the bench criticizing you.
Hmm.
You have to block that noise out. And you have to get in the game and give it everything you got every day. And so that's sort of been the way I've tried to proceed.
Yeah, that's great advice. So I know, you began your career as Airman Spencer and rose to become a four-star general in the Air Force. How did that early, enlisted experience shape, the leader that you became?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it gave me an appreciation for our enlisted force. I mean, you know, the our adversaries fear us mainly for our enlisted force because they're the ones that are out there fighting the wars. You know,
Mhm.
they're the ones that have to adapt and overcome and make decisions. And so I learned that very early. And I also learned how important it is to give our great enlisted force good leadership,
Mhm.
and not hinder them, but lead them,
Mhm.
and not talk down to them, but work with them, because they're very smart, and they're focused on the mission. So I've always had an appreciation for our enlisted force. One of the things that happened to me that I'll always remember is when I got commissioned, graduated OTS. officers training school, my father picked me up at Dulles Airport, and I was still in uniform. And again, he was a retired enlisted soldier. Um, He'd never done anything like this before. When I came, and back then, that was before 9/11, so you could drive right up to the
Yeah.
front of the airport.
Oh, wow.
He got out of the car and came around and saluted me.
Oh, wow.
And that really touched me. But he said to me, "Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget about the enlisted folks. Those are the ones that make the military go." And I've never forgotten that.
Yeah. I loved your memoir, Dark
Wow.
Horse.
Yeah.
Such a great book. I highly recommend it to everyone in the audience. It's a fantastic read. But I know your book describes this incredible journey that you've had, a life of service. Um, what myths do you think, your experience, your story challenges most directly, kind of myths that society has or that people may hold themselves?
Yeah, good question. The reason I wrote the book was just for that reason, that people would ask me all the time, how do you become a four-star general?
Mhm.
Now, of course, that's the wrong question, and no one can answer that.
Mhm.
But implicit in that question was an assumption that I had gone to the academy, that I was a fighter pilot, that my parents were generals, whatever. And they are shocked when I tell them I didn't have any of that,
Mhm.
in my career. And so there's this myth, I think, that if you're not given certain things, you can't be successful.
Mhm.
And I always, again, what I live by is it's not where you start that's important, it's where you finish. And don't let anyone or anybody or any background that you have discourage you or cause you to believe that you are limited in your capability or your potential.
So I know you had a 40, year Air Force career. You've seen war and conflict in multiple places across the globe. Can you share how war fighting has changed since your early days in the Air Force to now?
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit, particularly with technology. Keep in mind, I came in when I was 18 years old, which means I was at the tail end of Vietnam, where what we know is, um, ISR now, or with drones was an old F-4 flying low across Vietnam, excuse me, snapping one picture at a time. So things have changed quite a bit with technology, which is, I think, a good thing. Um, but the world has grown more complex as well, and so um, the geopolitical challenges are very tough. Um, Unfortunately, our country as a whole, regardless of what party's in power, has sort of lost confidence and trust in the government. So people are skeptical about what they hear, which is unfortunate. People are skeptical about what they watch on the news, which is unfortunate. So it's hard sometimes, I think, to uh, understand what the real facts are.
Mm.
But in terms of warfare itself, I just believe that it's just so much more complex, um, and requires those in the military to be really focused, more tech savvy, obviously, than when I came in, and understanding the long reach that everyone has now.
So how do you think today's leaders, should prepare for conflict that spans, multiple domains, kinetic, cyber, financial, informational, all the different areas, little different than in Vietnam.
Yeah, good question again, because as a country, even and not just as a military, we haven't grappled with a lot of that. I mean, we don't know, for example, is a cyber attack um, something we should respond to kinetically?
Mhm.
We really haven't wrestled with that. We haven't resolved that. If someone was attacking us the way countries attack us in cyberspace, we'd be at war with someone.
Yeah.
So I think it's incumbent upon leaders to understand the domains. I think more importantly, though, I think it's incumbent upon leaders to understand who they're leading now,
Mhm.
because these are young folks who came up much differently than most of the leadership, and are on communicate by by telephone, and shop by telephone, and it's incumbent, I think, upon leaders to understand that skill set and that environment, and adapt to it, and take advantage of the skills that they have.
So at the 4-star level, decisions carry often irreversible consequences. How did you think about risk when there was not necessarily one clear, right, perfect answer?
Yeah, that is what leadership's all about. I mean,
Mhm.
because rarely are you going to get 100% information,
Mhm.
and you have to be able to um, figure out, at many times 70, 80% information and make a decision. I think you always have to think about, what's my off ramp? What's my decision space? What is my plan B? Um, I think it was Mike Tyson that said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And so I think leaders have to always think through, this plan sounds good on paper. What do I do if it doesn't work? Or
Mhm.
what if I do because the enemy gets a vote?
Mhm.
And so I think it's really important to, when you're making decisions, one, don't be afraid to make a decision. Get as much information as you can, but don't be paralyzed, waiting on every bit of information because you're afraid you will make the wrong decision. You really can't lead that way. Um, but understand also that you're not perfect and you're going to make mistakes. And so I always try to have a couple of people that I really respect and trust, that I could run something by and say, hey, this is what I'm looking at. What do you think? And try to get as much input as I can, uh, but not shy away from the decision. And I think more importantly than that, take accountability for it. I made the decision, it's on me.
Mhm.
If it goes bad, I'm going to raise my hand and say that was me. It went bad. Um, but again, hopefully, what I try to do anyway is think through, if this doesn't go the way I think it's going to go, then what? And
Yeah.
it's too late to think about that after the fact.
So you have 2 Air Force awards named in your honor, one of which is focused on innovation. Can you share insights on how leaders drive innovation in an effective, sustainable way in, a large bureaucratic organization?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been fascinated by innovation. The Air Force, I mean, was birthed on innovation, with
Mhm.
Wright brothers, with starting with a bicycle. Um, and look at where we are now.
Yeah.
So um, I remember during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, that the American people were blown away and just beside themselves that they were watching, bombs hit targets precisely, and actually got a film of it.
Yeah.
Um, and what they didn't know was that was years of innovation, years of testing. And I've always been of the opinion that if we ever have to actually go to war with someone, that enemy should wake up the first day and say, oh my God, where'd they get that from? I didn't know they had that.
Mhm.
So I think innovation is really critical, um, to be able as a force multiplier,
Mhm.
because again, war is constantly changing. I mean, the traditional, the war in Europe's going to be in the Fulda Gap, and we're all going, that's outdated. Even the China-Taiwan, scenario with the Taiwan Straits, the standoff weapons, that I mean, that's not practical anymore. And so we have to constantly innovate, constantly try to think ahead and develop systems that will not only counteract what the enemy has, but surprise the enemy with something they didn't know about.
So after retiring from the Air Force, you went into uh, to lead AFBA and Five Star Life, organizations that are focused on benefits and survivor support. Can you tell us what drew you to that mission?
Yeah, a good question. AFBA, Armed Forces Benefit Association, it is a benefits association that serves those that serve our country. So it serves military, serves first responders. And so to me, it was just a continuation of service
Mhm.
that I could do something that I was giving back to military and first responders. So it's a great organization that our primary benefit is term life insurance at a low cost, which is why we're a nonprofit. So
Mhm.
to be able to help people when they need help the most is something that was really appealing to me, and I really enjoy it.
So I know you've led across enlisted, officer, and even, civilian workforce. From your perspective, where do organizations most often, fail their people?
Yeah, I think in my view, the people ask me a lot, what is the most important leadership tool that I thought was effective? And I mean, obviously there are a lot of them, but I always found that leadership by walking around
Mhm.
was the most effective. No matter what technology we have, no matter how many emails we can send, um, nothing substitutes for getting out in front of your people, looking them in the eye, them looking you in the eye, and communicating, seeing the body language, make sure they understand what your vision is, and you understand what their limitations are, so you can help them. So that's been very beneficial to me. I remember during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, which almost seems primitive now because I was the comptroller, squadron commander when that happened at a base in North Carolina that was very involved in the war.
Mhm.
But it was before electronic funds transfer. I mean, people were still getting paper checks,
Oh, wow.
and we put people on airplanes. I put finance people on an airplane to deploy with a briefcase full of cash. It was crazy. Today to think of that is crazy. Um, but what I remember most about that experience was the second airplane to deploy. I had three finance guys on that airplane. And I got on the airplane. It was a C-141, which we don't even have anymore. And I was giving them last minute instructions, about safes and how you handle money, and et cetera. And we would have to buy a lot of stuff on the other end. Um, and there was and what we would call in the Air Force, an Airman First Class. So essentially an E3 was the youngest. And I could tell he was scared and rightfully so. But during that conversation, he looked at me and he said, I was a major at the time. He said, "Sir, are you going with us?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going now, but I've already volunteered. I mean, I want to get over there as fast as I can. You're going to be fine." And he said, I'd feel a lot better if you were going with us. And that sort of hit me, as to this leadership thing we sort of throw around is real. Uh,
Yeah.
and we were a team there at the base, and more than that, we were a family. And they felt like as long as my leader was there, I'll be fine. I don't know what's going to happen, but I've got my leader that's going to, I can follow. And that really hit me hard because of all the leadership courses I'd been to and all the reading, on war and all the books they give us to read
Mhm.
and all of that. Um, that hit, I mean, it was real. This wasn't academic. This was real.
Yeah.
And so leadership is real, and it's something that I hope people take very seriously.
So many people, that they want to make a difference, but they may not know, how or what to do. What guidance do you offer for those who feel called, to service, but really aren't sure where to start?
Yeah, I agree. I think the short answer is put one foot in front of the other. But um, yeah, I'm with you. I don't understand people who just come to work and go home.
Hmm.
I've always wanted to make a difference, to do my best. Um, and to me, I mean, if you get stationed somewhere or you're in industry and you have a job, what's the point? If you're just going in to get a paycheck, then you're probably doing the wrong thing. Um, so I think people need to be committed to what they're doing, to give everything they can give, and try to leave the organization better than when they leave than it was when they got there. And try to make an impression on people. Try like that chief master sergeant that helped me. Go out there and find people you can help. And they may not come to you. You may have to go to them. But go out there and try to influence the organization and try to, more importantly, influence people to help them achieve whatever goals and dreams that they have.
So do you have any final words of advice or parting thoughts for the audience today?
No, I would just, no, I've been blessed not on my career, but my life. And so, I don't know that I would do it any different if I had it to do over again. Um, the only thing keeps me up at night now is, I'm just disappointed, I guess, that our country seems to be so at odds with each other. Everybody's mad, and they won't talk to each other. And I'm still relatively apolitical,
Mhm.
but I try to seek out people who think differently than I do and just have a conversation. And they may not change my mind, I may not change theirs, but I typically walk away thinking, okay, well, at least I understand why they feel the way they feel.
Yeah.
Um, excuse me. I wish more Americans would do that.
Mhm.
Folks don't even talk to their neighbors anymore.
Mm-mm.
And I think that's a real problem. Um, excuse me. And we've allowed politics to engulf just about everything in our around us. There's hardly any topic anymore that doesn't take some political spin. And
Mhm.
again, that's unfortunate. So I guess, encourage people, particularly those with the military background,
Mhm.
is think about our military service. We didn't care where you came from, who you believed in, who you voted for. None of that mattered. I was the vice chief of staff of the Air Force for 3 years. I worked for two chiefs of staff. I have no idea what their politics were. It didn't matter. I was focused on the mission, and we were focused on the mission. We had things to do, and I just wish every American, one by one, within their own communities and within their own families, would just put the politics aside, and just try to get along with each other.
Yeah, that seemingly small act on individual level would make a world of difference.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, General Spencer, for sharing your insights, your experiences today. I know your contributions have impacted not only our nation, but folks all over the globe, and we really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Yes.
Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on the podcast. You're really doing a great job. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tipping Spears. We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think about our future. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.